They keep saying the economy is strong, that unemployment is low, that everything is under control. But step outside the headlines, and you'll see something different. Empty offices, silent warehouses, job listings disappearing overnight. People with years of experience suddenly locked out of the system they helped build. This isn't a minor slowdown. It's not a correction. It's the quiet collapse of the American workforce, one company at a time. Amazon, Google, Tesla. They started it. But now it's spreading into factories, schools, hospitals, even small businesses. Every week, another announcement, another round of cuts, another piece of the middle class quietly erased. The news won't call it a crisis yet, because they can't. But if you listen closely, you can already hear it. The sound of an economy unraveling in silence. This is the next phase of the American meltdown, and it's happening right now, while everyone's pretending it's not. It's spreading quietly, like a slow fire moving through dry grass. At first, it was just a few thousand workers, then tens of thousands. And now, across America, a massive layoff wave is rippling through industries that once felt untouchable. Tech giants like Amazon, Google, and Tesla began this cycle, not because they were collapsing, but because they were preparing. They saw what was coming: a slower economy, shrinking consumer spending, and an unstable future. Now, that wave is spreading beyond Silicon Valley, into logistics, real estate, finance, retail, and manufacturing. Every week, a new announcement drops. A factory cuts 5,000 jobs. A major bank quietly eliminates entire departments. Warehouses are closing overnight. And yet, the headlines stay small, buried under stories of record stock highs and corporate efficiency upgrades. But what's really happening is something deeper. A great American job meltdown. In every recession, the first cuts are made to trim costs. This time, they're cutting into the core of the middle class. These aren't failing companies. They're profitable ones. They're laying people off to survive an economic model that no longer works. Because the truth is, America's economy has become addicted to cheap labor, inflated profits, and artificial growth. For years, tech firms hired too fast, retailers expanded too wide, and construction boomed on debt that was never sustainable. Now, as demand falls and debt rises, the correction has begun. The scary part? It doesn't look like a crash. It looks like a quiet adjustment. But behind that calm surface, millions of people are losing their jobs, with no clear path back. A single layoff from Amazon can ripple into 10 other smaller companies. Delivery contractors, packaging suppliers, and service providers. When Tesla cuts production shifts, parts suppliers across the Midwest lose contracts. When Google freezes hiring, marketing firms, software vendors, and small startups collapse. This is the domino effect, and it's happening in real time. In states like California, Texas, and Illinois, unemployment filings are climbing fast. But the full numbers are being delayed, revised, softened. Because the last thing the markets want right now is panic. But people on the ground already know. The layoffs aren't numbers, they're lives. Families facing rising rent with no income. Graduates realizing their degree doesn't mean job security. People in their 50s applying for positions half their pay grade just to hold on to health insurance. And through it all, corporations continue posting record profits because efficiency has become the new word for fewer workers. Automation, outsourcing, and remote cuts are replacing stability with statistics. This isn't just about tech or business. It's about trust. The trust that if you worked hard, you'd be safe. That if you stayed loyal, the company would stand by you. That trust is gone. The middle class was built on predictable work and predictable pay. Now, It's built on credit cards, side gigs, and survival. So when you see another headline that says, Amazon cuts 10,000 jobs, remember, it's not just 10,000. It's the small towns that depended on those paychecks, the families skipping grocery trips, the car payments that go unpaid. This isn't the peak of the crisis. It's just the beginning of a long, slow unraveling, one that most people won't notice until it's already taken everything. Because collapses don't always come with explosions. Sometimes they start with silence and the quiet click of a final layoff email. When a company lays off workers, it's never just a company problem. It's a chain reaction. Every job lost sets off another quiet collapse somewhere else. That's the part most people never see. When Amazon shuts down a fulfillment center, it's not just warehouse employees who lose work. It's the janitors, the cleaning crews, the maintenance teams, the truck drivers, the food vendors, entire small businesses that rely on that one hub to survive. Within weeks, the ripple spreads outward. Restaurants nearby see fewer customers. Gas stations sell less fuel. Local housing markets slow down. That's the hidden economy of America, built on connections that were never designed to break all at once. And now they are. It starts in tech, but it never stays there. Those high-paying jobs in Silicon Valley supported thousands of smaller ones, from startups to contractors to basic service workers. When the big players pull back, everything beneath them cracks. It's like removing the top stone from a fragile tower. The pressure shifts, and everything below begins to crumble. We're now seeing the effects of that shift. Trucking companies are cutting routes because there's less freight to move. Construction projects are stalling as commercial demand slows. Even major retailers are quietly reducing staff hours, not by announcing layoffs, but by simply not scheduling shifts. It's a silent, invisible kind of job loss, harder to track, but just as destructive. These aren't isolated incidents. They're symptoms of a deeper weakness. America's economy doesn't crash overnight anymore. It erodes piece by piece, paycheck by paycheck. In 2025, we're watching a system adjust to a reality it can't sustain. An economy inflated by credit, built on digital convenience, and now facing a slowdown that no one can tech their way out of. The truth is, corporations are protecting profits before people. They learned during 2020 that they can survive, even thrive, with fewer workers. When they cut half their workforce, their stock often rises. Investors reward collapse, because collapse means efficiency. And that's what this new wave of layoffs really is, the next evolution of the American economy. Not about growth, not about innovation, but about survival. The people who once built the backbone of these industries are being replaced by automation, algorithms, and outsourcing. The same skills that once promised stability now mean nothing against a spreadsheet that values cost over loyalty. We used to call them corporate layoffs. Now, they're economic surgery, cutting away human labor to preserve quarterly reports. And what's terrifying is how normal it's all becoming. Each time another round of cuts hits, the reaction grows quieter. No one protests anymore. No one asks why profitable companies are firing thousands. Because this is what collapse looks like in the modern age. Not chaos, not riots, but silence. The news mentions it once, then moves on. But the people living it don't move on. They live the aftershocks, the unpaid bills, the panic, the sense that no matter how much effort you give, the system doesn't care. The American dream was built on the idea that work meant security. But this is the new reality. Your job exists only until a boardroom decides it doesn't. Every layoff sends a message that humans have become optional. And once that message spreads, fear becomes policy. Workers stop asking for raises. They stop pushing back. They accept more work for less pay because they've seen what happens when you're replaced. That fear keeps the economy running until it doesn't. Because when enough people lose faith in the system, they stop spending. They stop investing. They pull back, save what they can, and the slowdown deepens. That's when a layoff crisis becomes a recession. And that's where America is headed. A nation quietly shrinking from within, one paycheck at a time. For decades, the middle class was the heartbeat of America. It was the comfort zone between survival and success, a place where stability felt possible. A modest home, a steady job, a retirement plan, maybe a family vacation every few years. It wasn't wealth, but it was enough to feel safe. But that version of the middle class doesn't exist anymore. Not really. What's left is an illusion, a fragile image that looks stable on the surface but is crumbling underneath. Every new wave of layoffs pulls more people out of that middle line and drops them into financial uncertainty. It's not just the unemployed. It's everyone barely holding on. It's the family that had a little savings but now lives paycheck to paycheck. It's the homeowner refinancing again just to cover rising costs. It's the person who still has a job but quietly knows they couldn't survive one missed paycheck. The American middle class has become a balancing act between income and debt. And right now, that balance is collapsing. You can see it in the numbers, but it's clearer in the silence. People aren't buying new cars anymore. They're keeping the old ones running. They're cutting subscriptions, canceling small luxuries, buying cheaper food, skipping vacations. Not because they want to be frugal, but because the math doesn't work anymore. Inflation may have slowed, but prices never came back down. Rent keeps climbing, insurance costs rise, and interest rates have turned every dream into a burden. The middle class isn't living. It's managing. And that's the quiet truth most Americans won't say out loud. They're not lazy. They're not irresponsible. They're just exhausted. For years, they were told that hard work leads to success. But now, they're realizing it only leads to survival. Wages haven't kept up with the cost of living for decades, and the wealth gap has turned into a canyon. The top 1% gained trillions in the last decade, while everyone else traded stability for stress. The system that once lifted people up now keeps them running in place. A treadmill economy where every year you work harder, only to stay exactly where you are. And now, with the layoffs accelerating, that treadmill is speeding up. People who thought they were safe, managers, engineers, educators, even nurses, are realizing safety is an illusion. One company decision, one policy shift, one AI tool, and years of stability vanish overnight. This isn't just about jobs. It's about identity. For millions, work was more than a paycheck. It was a sense of purpose, of belonging, of control. When that's taken away, what's left isn't just unemployment. It's disorientation. You start questioning everything, the economy, the system, even your own worth. And while you're doing that, the bills keep coming. That's how collapse really feels. Not like a storm, but like a slow fade. A gradual sinking where each month feels a little tighter. Each paycheck stretches a little thinner. Each dream drifts a little further out of reach. This is the new America, where the line between middle class and working poor is invisible, where a layoff isn't a setback, it's a free fall. The middle class was once the safety net between poverty and power. Now it's disappearing, swallowed by a system that rewards profit over people, efficiency over security, and silence over fairness. And as that middle vanishes, so does something else: hope. Because when millions of people realize that the American dream was never built for them, they stop believing. And that's when a financial crisis turns into something far more dangerous, a social one. For years, The headlines made it seem like layoffs were a tech problem. Amazon, Google, Meta, Tesla. It was easy to believe it was just one sector cutting back after years of overgrowth. A correction, not a collapse. But now, that illusion is gone. The layoffs are no longer isolated in Silicon Valley. They're spreading, quietly, steadily, into the places that hold up the rest of the country. Hospitals, schools, factories, construction sites. The sectors that don't make headlines, but make life possible. Across the U.S., hospitals are laying off nurses and support staff because they can't afford to keep their doors open. Not because the need is gone, but because the system is broken. Private equity has turned healthcare into a business, not a service. Rural hospitals are shutting down because they can't compete with corporate networks. Medical staff who carried this country through a pandemic are being replaced by contract workers, cheaper, temporary, disposable. In education, teachers are leaving faster than schools can replace them. Budgets are shrinking. Class sizes are growing. The very foundation of learning is being hollowed out from within. Even construction, the industry that was supposed to thrive from new housing demand, is showing cracks. Projects are being paused mid-build, investors are pulling funding, and workers are being sent home with no guarantee of return. The crisis isn't limited to one industry anymore. It's systemic. Every sector is being restructured, not by innovation, but by desperation. The goal isn't to build, heal, or educate. It's to survive the numbers, to look stable enough for investors to stay calm while the foundation erodes beneath. And what's most disturbing is how quietly it's happening. While politicians argue about job creation, cities across America are quietly losing them. Entire workforces are being replaced by automation, foreign outsourcing, or simply nothing at all, because it's cheaper that way. That's the truth no one wants to say out loud. America's biggest problem isn't just job loss, it's job replacement. The new economy doesn't need as many people. Machines don't take sick days. AI doesn't need health care. Offshore workers don't demand living wages. Efficiency has become the new god, and human labor the sacrifice. And every time a company celebrates record profits after laying off thousands, it sends a message to every other business that this is the model to follow. That the future of success is built on cutting people, not hiring them. What's happening now isn't a temporary slowdown. It's a permanent transformation, one that's quietly redefining what work even means. Jobs aren't coming back the same way they left. They'll return smaller, automated, less secure, and underpaid. That's the real crisis, not just the collapse of employment, but the collapse of stability itself. We used to measure the economy by jobs created. Now we measure it by how many people can be replaced while profits still rise. And in that equation, there's no room for humanity. This is why the American collapse doesn't look like past recessions. There's no single crash, no dramatic event. It's a silent adjustment, where everything looks normal until it's not, where people are still working but earning less, where cities are still running but slower, where progress keeps being promised, but fewer people are actually part of it. The meltdown isn't coming. It's already here. You can see it in the quiet hospital corridors, the half-empty classrooms, the unfinished construction sites, the small towns with boarded-up shops. The systems that once kept America running are now running on fumes. And when a nation's essential sectors start cutting deeper than they can heal, what comes next isn't recovery. It's collapse. The story of America's job collapse doesn't end with layoffs. It ends with what happens after. When the headlines fade, when the numbers are updated, when the corporate statements stop, that's when the real impact begins. The next phase isn't dramatic. It's subtle. It's the slow hollowing out of everyday life. You'll see it in small ways first. Fewer lights on in office buildings, shorter store hours, longer lines at the unemployment office. You'll see it in people's faces, the quiet frustration, the tired eyes, the unspoken fear that this time, things won't bounce back. That's because this time, the system itself is different. The old rules don't apply anymore. In past recessions, jobs returned when spending increased. But now, automation fills the gaps faster than workers can. Remote outsourcing replaces local talent before they can find new work. And artificial intelligence is taking roles once thought untouchable. Writers, designers, analysts, even teachers. This isn't a cycle. It's an evolution. And not a kind one. The next phase of America's meltdown won't be about unemployment numbers. It'll be about disconnection. Millions of people detached from work, from security, from purpose. Because work in America was never just about money. It was identity. It was belonging. And when that's gone, what replaces it? A quiet void begins to grow. In homes, in communities, in people's minds. When enough people lose that sense of direction, society starts to change. Not in protests or revolutions, but in quiet apathy. A collective burnout that seeps through every city and every neighborhood. You'll start hearing phrases like, "Nobody's hiring," "Nothing's stable," "It's not worth it anymore." And that's when an economy stops being about recovery and starts being about survival. This is where America is heading. Into a slow transformation that no one's truly ready for. A future where the jobs that built the middle class no longer exist. Where millions are pushed into temporary work, gig labor, or forced relocation. Where the distance between doing fine and barely getting by disappears completely. That's what a meltdown really is. It's not an explosion, it's erosion. The foundation stays standing just long enough to make you believe it's safe. Until one day, it's not. The next phase of this crisis won't be on Wall Street. It'll be in the small towns, the suburbs, the kitchens of families who never thought they'd fall this far. It'll be in the quiet conversations between people who used to have everything planned, and now have no idea what comes next. And maybe that's the hardest truth to face. That the collapse isn't happening to America. It's happening within it. A slow unraveling, one job, one home, one family at a time. This is how systems end. Not with a bang, but with exhaustion. And if you listen closely, you can already hear it. In the silence between layoffs, in the pauses between headlines, in the spaces where the middle class used to stand. The U.S. job meltdown isn't the beginning of a new recession. It's the beginning of a new era. One where the idea of security no longer exists. Because when a nation starts to run out of stable work, it eventually starts to run out of hope.